Off. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. It is the inaugural kickoff session for our new Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series. Today we're going to be talking turkey and upcoming seasons, and we are gonna get rolling.
It just feels really good to be back doing these presentations again with James, and we've got quite a few of them upcoming, so we'll get into that in a little bit, but welcome back everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you're new to WebEx, this is the platform that DNR uses. Please direct all of your questions into the Q&A. That's where we can scroll through it really easily. Once we get to the end of the session, Kraig and I will be working on answering your questions, and we're going to get rolling here. So, like I said, this is the inaugural session for our new Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series. We're going to be doing this through the rest of the year. So, this is a new chance for us to engage with folks across Minnesota, across the country, across the world, and it's a chance for us to share what we know and how we know what to do. Today, I'm going to briefly go over what the series is. I'm going to go over who Kraig and I are, because we're going to be talking with you today, and then we're going to get into the meat of talking about calling for turkeys and what our upcoming seasons are. So the Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series, this is brand new for us. This is going to be building off of what we did last year with our turkey webinar and our deer webinar. But it's going to be ongoing, and it's going to cover a variety of topics. It's also going to be a little shorter. It's going to be more condensed information, and it's going to be a wider variety of stuff. So this is just going to be a weekly series where you can tune in to learn new stuff and hear directly from DNR staff, ask us questions. It's totally free, and we hope it gets you fired up about getting outside. For the foreseeable future, this is going to be Wednesdays at noon from Central Time. And it's going to be for 30 minutes or approximately. If we might run over a little bit with questions, but we're going to try to keep it short and sweet and to the point. And our goal is for you to just find out more about hunting, fishing, outdoor recreation opportunities you have across Minnesota, share with you how we as the DNR manage some of those resources, and give tips on how you can be better stewards for our shared natural resources. These will be recorded, and we'll be posting them up on our website. But there may be a little bit of a lag as we work out that process. For the next 9 weeks, we've got our classes in place. It's going to be covering everything from shotgun selection tips, fly fishing. I'll be talking about spring foraging later in April. As soon as we get into May, it's going to be fishing basics with Steve and Ray for the fishing opener. We're going to talk about kayaking in the backwaters of the Mississippi, and then we're going to go back to bass, and then we're going to talk about a couple of DNR-specific programs like the Take 'em On Fishing and Quality Sunfish Initiative. We are going to be continuing this through the summer and into the fall, but we're going to keep it a little more condensed. So there's going to be registrations for those separate events coming up with a list of content with each of those registrations. So we're really looking forward to it. We're really excited about it, and we really hope you enjoy it. So that's what we're doing. That's the series. And let me get into some introductions. My name is James Burnham. I am the Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Coordinator. That's R3 for the state of Minnesota. And basically that just means I'm trying to get more people out hunting, fishing, and enjoying Minnesota's outdoors. Kraig, you want to tell the good people who you are?
So I'm Kraig Kiger. I'm up in Grand Rapids, and I'm the state shooting sports coordinator. Teach people how to use a firearm safely and how to select the proper firearm for their activity. And I help James with the presentation. So again, welcome everybody.
And Kraig and I did the Learn to Deer Hunt webinar series last fall, and with our guests, and had a lot of fun with it. So it's really great to be talking about this stuff again. So before we get into turkey calling, I just want to point people, this is not how to turkey hunt clinic. We don't have time to really get into that. If you go to our Hunting Wild Turkey page, we've got our webinar from last spring posted up there, our Learn to Turkey Hunt 101. It's over 4 hours of recorded content. How do you get started? What do you need? What are the rules and regulations? How do you find a spot? We also have written guides on tips and tricks and gear selecting for turkey. And Benji posted the link to that in the chat. So you can get there from there, or you can just do a search for MNDNR Learn to Hunt Turkey, and it should take you right there. But there's just too much content to really sandwich that into 30 minutes. We're really going to be focused on the content for today, which is, drum roll, calls. We're going to be talking calls today. I'm going to demonstrate what some basic calls are, what some basic calling techniques are, some strategies behind it, and we're going to get into it. So before we get started, just a real quick, why are we calling for turkeys? If you're new to turkey hunting, it may feel like a kind of a silly thing to do, but that's really part of the big appeal. Like, you actually get to talk to the animals. You get to have a little Dr. Dolittle moment where, you're saying stuff and the animal's saying stuff back and you're saying stuff back. And it's really fun. It's a really, if you're used to elk hunting, then maybe this isn't such a big deal for you. But if you're an Easterner, like most of us, that engagement with the animal, it's just super cool. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to mimic a female turkey, a hen, that's looking to breed. The springtime comes around right about now, and the hens are like, hey, I'm ready to breed, because they only do it once. And so they got to announce it. They got to say, let's go. And that's when the tom gobbles, the male turkey, the tom gobbles, and they try to find each other in the woods and do what two turkeys do when they care about each other very, very much. But for us, we're trying to mimic that hen and get that tom into range so that we can get a good shot. And what I mean by range, that's 30 yards. It's close. It's close enough that you can feel it in your chest when they gobble. And so that's why we're trying to call, is to get him super close. And there's a bunch of different calls, because it's a lot like fishing lures. Sometimes one works when another one doesn't. Birds respond to different calls different ways. It depends on the season. It depends on that individual. It depends on where you're at. And there's a lot of trade-offs with these calls in how easy they are to use, how loud they can be, the amount of calls that you can generate off of them, how weather resistant they are. That's something to think about, because sometimes you might be turkey hunting and it's a really wet, dewy morning, or it could be raining. And the amount of motion that it takes to use. And these are all trade-offs that kind of go into it. But when you're first starting out, if you're just beginning to get into turkey hunting, A, fantastic, welcome. It's fun. It's a great way to spend time outdoors. But B, keep it simple. You don't need a truckload of calls. You can get by with one or two and build off of there. So where do you start with these calls? Well, you start with the simple ones. The two simplest calls that you can think of, or that I would recommend, are a push button call. And that literally requires you to push a button, and I'll demonstrate this in just a second, and a box call. Now, the box call, you can see pictures of them here. That little green box, that's a push button call. Those two, wooden rectangles, those are box calls. They're literally a box with a lid. And they both act by generating friction that sound like a turkey. A push button call is a fantastic resource because it literally takes moving one finger, so you're not moving a lot. Turkeys can pick up on motion really easily in the woods, so that lack of movement is a really great pro in favor of using a box call, or excuse me, using a push button call. They can generate a wide variety of calls. And again, we don't have time to really get into all the calls turkeys can make. If you're into that, please check out our online resources. There's a bunch of them. So you can generate a wide variety of the calls that the birds are making. It's really easy to use. It doesn't take a lot of movement. The cons with a push button call is they tend to be a little quieter, and they're not necessarily the most weather resistant thing. They'll hold up to a dewy morning, but if it's like a drizzle or a steady rain, A, if it's a steady rain, you may not want to be out there, but B, your friction, remember, these require things rubbing together to generate friction, to generate a sound. If they get soaked, they're not going to make that sound. So those are the trade-offs. They're not super loud, and they're not the most weather resistant. The box call kind of fills in those gaps. So if you're going to start with one call, start with a push button. It's easy. You can generate a lot of calls. If you need to add one call to that initial call, get a box call, because they're really loud. They can still make a lot of calls depending on how much you practice with it, but that first initial call that you want to make, called a yelp, box calls are really easy to make yelps with. They can be weatherproof. I've got a waterproof one, I've got a non-waterproof one, and they're really great, tremendous tools to be out in the woods with. So start with a push button, then go to a box call, and that push button will give you all the variety that you need. It'll give you the softer calls that you know are good to have, because when that tom first hears the hen calling, that's his like little signal. Oh, there's somebody interested over there, and he comes walking in. If he answers you after you hit that box call, put the box call down, give it some time, and then switch over to that push button and make those softer calls. Turkeys can hear a lot better than we can, and when they hear those softer calls, those are signs of contentment for those turkeys. So he's going to be a lot more amenable to coming in if he hears a hen that announces, "Hey, I'm over here," and he gobbles back and he goes, "I'm over here," and then she gets quiet, and he's going to be like, "Well, where'd she go? I thought she, well, let me go look for her." And as he gets closer, if you're making those softer calls, he's going to be like, "Oh, there's some really comfortable, content birds over there. I'm going to walk right in." That's the plan. Sometimes it doesn't go to plan, but that's the plan, and that's the strategy. So I've talked about those easy calls. I'm going to demonstrate what some of those look like. I'm going to stop sharing this video so that you can see what I'm doing with my hands a little better, and we're going to get into demonstrating what some of these calls look like moving forward. So here we go. We're going to start off. I'm going to start off with my trusty box call. It's a small little thing, and I'm going to do a quick yelp. And again, it's just moving that finger. Now that's just a series of yelps. That's just a hen turkey looking for anybody, really. It doesn't necessarily have to be a tom. It's just her in the woods saying, "Hey, I'm over here. Where is everybody?" You can tell how close I had to hold it to that mic, my computer mic, to hear that. And I already saw somebody say you could barely hear it. Like I said, these are softer calls. Turkeys hear a lot better than we do, so they're still going to hear this at a decent distance. But you're not going to use this to go across a cut 40 a field, or a field of cut corn. You're not going to use this to go across a valley. You're going to kind of use it to get that immediate 100 meters around you. The birds are going to hear that. So it's just a little softer. I'll hold it a little closer. And you can do some purrs, just like a cat. Turkeys purr when they're happy. And again, that's really quiet, but for turkeys, they'll be able to hear, they'll be able to pick up on it. Moving forward from here, if you've got headphones on or you're broadcasting this to the general public, the calls are going to get louder. You might have your finger on your volume adjustment because it might get a little loud. Here is our box call. You can see it. It's a hollow box with a friction surface, and different people use these different ways. I like to hold it. I'm right-handed, so I hold the box with my left hand, and I hold the lid with my right hand, and I put my index finger right on that little notch, and I'll do some yelps. And it's 3, 5, 6 little yelps, and then I'm quiet. And then I'm waiting and I'm listening. Now, when I start off calling, I always start quiet because you never know where the birds are around you. So I'd start off with a little push button call and just do some quiet yelps. And see if anything responds nearby. If nothing responds after 20, 30, 40 minutes, depending on how much I want to sit there and how numb my butt is getting, then I'll switch over to the box call to try to get a bigger radius of interest. Now you can do clucks with these. They're just short little chips. And yelps are great. And see what happens. Now, if you're wondering about the cadence, the rhythm of how to call, how frequently, I always listen to what the birds tell me. You know, if I get out there and there's a hen that answers me back and she's calling really quick, so I give a couple of yelps and she calls back. That's how I answer her. I think we're all familiar with birds attacking their image in a mirror. They do the same thing auditorily. So if they hear something that's a challenge to how they're asserting themselves, they're going to come in. So I'll base my calling patterns and timing off of what I'm hearing in the woods. So those are our two basic calls. We've got our box call, we've got our push button. Between these two, you're going to be good. The one thing I will say as a note of caution with having these is this lid, if this is in your backpack loose or your fanny pack, or if you have a turkey vest, that's great. You don't need one. This is going to make noise moving around. So what I do is I'll take a Scotch pad, just plain old Scotch pad, and I'll put it between the lid and the striking surface. I'll grab a rubber band, and that's my silencer. It doesn't make any noise. So think about that when you're moving around. Every sound these birds are going to pick up on. So you want to be managing that as you move forward. All right, so those are kind of like, if you're going to start anywhere, start there. They're ease of use. They cover all your bases that you need to just to get out and have birds answer you. If you want to step it up a little bit, if you want to improve your variability, if you want to improve the amount of calls you can generate off of one call, you know, your next step is probably going to be a pot call or a pan call. This is a striking surface, and I'm not touching it, so don't put your fingerprints all over this. This is a striking surface and a sounding chamber, and you can see what those holes are. So it's basically just where you can generate friction with a striker. And I hold this like a pencil. And different people have different techniques, but I hold mine like a pencil. And I hold this away from my hand. You can see there's a gap here between the sounding board and my palm. Don't choke up on it like that, because you're killing the sound. Keep some space there. And take your pencil, your striker, and I'm just drawing little circles to get that yelp. Drawing little circles, little tight circles. And there's our yelp series, right? So I call, I listen. And if you want to do some clucks and purrs, and that's where these really kind of come in handy, you can really throw up the variation of the calls that you're doing. So it's not just a yelp, it's not just a purr. You can do some clucks. And you can have some purrs in there. And the more that you're able to put out there auditorily, orally, the more it resembles a real bird in the woods. And those toms are you're hoping that you can fool those toms. You know, you can get by with just a yelp, you can get by with just a purr, and you can get birds to engage. But the more you're throwing out there, the more sounds you're throwing out there that sound like a real bird, the better it'll be. And I'll try to hold it up a little bit more. So that's just a kind of a series of, that's a bird that's, you know, she's purring, but she's also clucking. When you have a bunch of short clucks right together, they call it cutting, and that's kind of the sign of an agitated bird. These come in a variety of striking surfaces and strikers. So this is one that's ceramic. This is one that's slate. If you're going to get started with a pot call, I'd recommend slate. It tends to be a little bit more forgiving of a surface to learn how to do this stuff with. Once you get slate down, you can step up to other surfaces like ceramic or even metal or acrylic. Now this is clear acrylic. Slate will not work when it's wet out. Even a heavy dew will take the friction away from this. And the other thing that you need to remember about this stuff, these have to be conditioned. You have to get a Scotch pad and roughen up that surface so that that striker has something to grab onto and create friction. And one tip I'll give is always condition your strikers in the same way. And I'm going to hold up my acrylic because you can see this bottom part is totally unconditioned. That's really smooth. That doesn't make any noise. When I'm hitting that conditioned spot, that really roughed up spot, that's where it's going to make noise. Always condition your calls in the same direction. I always go back and forth. You don't want to go in a circle because you're trying to draw circles with these strikers. And if you have a hard time, this one is easy because it's got a little lanyard hole at the 12 o'clock position. So I always know what orientation to hold it. If your call doesn't have that, what I've done is on this one, it's hard to see, but I filed a notch in the 12 o'clock position on this call so that even in the dark, I can feel what direction is my 12 o'clock right here. And I'm always conditioning in the same direction. All right, real quick, I'm gonna move on to mouth calls. These are tremendous. They don't take two hands like the pot call or the box call takes. They go in your mouth and your hands free. These have a big learning curve. Be patient, be forgiving. You might have to try different ones. They come in a variety of cuts, configurations, materials. Find the one that fits your mouth. Don't be afraid to trim it if it doesn't fit your mouth. You can cut this material right here. You just trim it down and get it to fit because you really want a good seal against the roof of your mouth. They typically come with some sort of indicator on the bottom. There's a little bump on the bottom here that lets you know that that goes down towards your tongue, and you put it in your mouth. These are awesome. If you can make it work, these are awesome because you can do everything the turkeys can do pretty much. They can be loud, they can be soft. Most of all, they're hands-free. And the different cuts that they make on the latex that goes on here affects the calls that are coming out. A really great trick, my Hail Mary calling strategy in the woods is, like I said, I always start soft because you never know where the birds are. Then I get louder. And then if nothing's coming in around 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock before I get up to move, my Hail Mary is I'll do, because these are hands-free, I can do two birds at once with another call. And that's making a ruckus. And that's two hens that are fired up. And if two hens are fired up, that's better than one hen that's fired up. So the rationale is that a tom's going to come into that and try to see what's going on. But it does kick up a bunch of noise if you've got shy birds or birds that are just really subordinate and don't want anything to do with two dominant hens having an argument. You might risk chasing them off. So that's why I say this is the last thing I do before I pick up and move on. Okay, so that's my calling and calling demonstrations. It kind of walks you through. There's other calls that are out there. There's no shortage of them. There's tube calls, there's wing bone calls. I'm actually wearing a wing bone call, which is a call made from the wing bones of a turkey. You've got your humerus, you've got your ulna, and you've got your radius, and it's a completely different kind of call. And it's just got a really tight little hole, and it's like you're sucking up a straw. You're just going. You're not blowing out, you're sucking in. So a whole bunch of calls. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of reasons to use different ones. how easy are they to use? What are the calls that you can generate with them? What are the weather conditions going to be, and how much movement do they take? And that movement is a big one, because when those birds are coming in, you don't necessarily know which direction they're going to come from. They like to circle around. So being able to have minimal movement is always a plus in my book. So really quickly, we're going to go back to the PowerPoint so that we can talk about some of the upcoming seasons, and then Kraig and I are going to answer your questions and get a moving. So here we go. Upcoming seasons. It's springtime. It's awesome. Kraig, do you want to hit that bear tag applications? You're muted, buddy. I got you. Go for it.
There we go. Spring bear tags are available to apply for, or fall bear tags are available to apply in the spring. So April 1st through May 1st, get your name into the drawing, kind of pick out an area, and we're going to be talking about bear hunting and bear baiting later in the series so that you can get out there and hopefully attract a bear to your site.
Awesome. Fantastic. So those applications are open through the beginning of May. Spring turkey's right around the corner. April 14th is the opener. Right after that, we've got spring trout. So especially in the Southeast, we are living in the golden age of trout fishing. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. There's a lot of great resources that are out there. I'm not from Minnesota. I grew up down south. I didn't know you could go rough fish spearing until my spiritual advisor, Kraig Kiger, told me as much. So, you know, that's a season that's out there. It's a good way to get out and do something that's different. Our Take a Mom fishing program is coming up May 8th and 9th, which is an awesome way to get mom out fishing with you. The fishing opener itself is going to be May 15th. That's basically an unofficial holiday in Minnesota, followed by bass and muskie. We have our Take a Kid fishing program coming up in June, and then bear baiting, after you get that tag that you applied for, that's going to start in August. So this is all the stuff that's coming up. There are a lot of great reasons to be out in the woods. It's just such a good time to be out there, and there's so much you can do with this stuff. So this is just a sample of what's coming up. All right, with our last few questions, I'm going to get into some of these questions that I'm seeing. So the first one that I'm looking at, are there certain calls for certain times of the day? And I'm going to have my mouth call handy here because it's just what I'm comfortable with and what's good for me, but y'all use whatever you need to use. Turkey hunting, you want to be out early, super early. You want to get them while the birds are still roosting in the trees. And when they're in the trees, they talk in the trees, and it's literally called tree talk. And when you're near a roost tree, you'll hear it. You'll hear these little and then they'll start yelping. And the toms are going to gobble because it's basically they're just announcing to the world, I'm here, I'm hot stuff. And so yeah, when I start off in the morning, it's always really soft clucks and purrs and a little bit I try to mimic that tree talk if I can hear it. Again, I repeat what I hear in the woods. Once they fly down, and if you're close enough, you'll hear it. It's like garbage bags in the wind. They're not quiet animals. You know, then I'm repeating what they do. And later on in the day, if nothing's come in, I'll skip the really soft stuff and I'll just yelp. And I'll just yelp to see what's out there. And see who's out there. So yeah, you can vary the calls by the time of day in the morning. And I just saw a little note flash about crow calls. You can use what are called locator calls, and those are non-turkey sounding calls like goose or crow or owl. And it elicits a response from the toms called a shock gobble. They're literally surprised. They're so pent up with aggression and just springtime interest and heightened activity that, you know, if you go boo, they'll go boo, and they'll just kind of like, they're just so high strung at that moment. So a crow call can get that sort of response, an owl can get that sort of response. I've heard slamming car doors get that sort of response. So it can be almost any loud noise, but those crow call, the reason why you would use a crow call or a goose call or an owl call is because you don't want them to know you're making a turkey call, right? You don't want to teach them that that call is not a turkey. And so some people use a variety of other calls to do that. It's totally fine. I will hoot like an owl in the woods, but you know, I find myself, if I'm out there and I'm hunting, I'm usually yelping because I'm trying to find, I want those birds to respond and I want them to know where I'm at, so that they can come in. But yeah, I'll owl hoot, especially when they're on the roost. You know, having an owl cruising around looking for an easy meal, that gets a shot gobble. Let me see, we've hit 12:31, but I want to get through a couple more of these questions. Josh, you've never gone turkey hunting before, but you'd like to start? Welcome, man. There's a lot of room out there for everybody. If you're interested, you can do it. How dangerous is it? You're dressed in full camo, just like this picture shows. You know, when you're hunting on public land, you want to make sure you take care. I always have a tree that's bigger than my body that I'm leaning against so that nobody can come up behind me and unload on a decoy, which unfortunately, I've never had it happen to me. I can't say that it doesn't happen. Every year you hear one or two stories out of all the turkey hunters that are out there of mistakes that get made. Excuse me. But you do want to take safety precautions. When I'm walking out early in the morning, it's usually not a problem because people, you know, I try to make an effort to be the first one out, first of all. Second of all, you know, nobody should be touching the trigger before legal shooting time. And you should be able to see, you should always be aware of what your target is and what's beyond it. But I always have a big tree that I lean up against because I don't want somebody coming up behind me and making a mistake. When I'm walking out, if I'm done for the day and I'm walking out, I usually have some blaze orange that I put on. A lot of turkey vests come with a flag that you just pull out and there's some orange there, and you can get by that way. I will say if you see somebody coming, if you're in the woods dressed as a turkey hunter and you see somebody coming, your hunt is for that immediate time period is done. Just call out, hey, there's a hunter over here. Don't stand up, don't wave, call out first, make sure they see where you're at, and then you can move. And hey, maybe at that point it's time to stretch your legs anyway. So I've never had any problems with it. I don't know anybody firsthand who's ever had any problems with it in terms of a safety issue. But every year, you know, stories make the rounds that, you know, somebody did something, there was an accident, or somebody was doing something they weren't supposed to, and you know, you want to always be safe.
Avoid red, white, and blue bandanas. Those colors mimic the color of a tom turkey's head when he's all worked up. And you know, if you got a set of the sniffles from spring pollen, don't bring your red bandana, your blue bandana, or a white bandana, because those colors can mimic a turkey's head. So stay away from those, and you should be good there.
That's a great point. It's not the time to be patriotic. Leave the American flag shirts at home and just dress in browns and grays if you don't have camo. Do you chalk your box calls? Sometimes you have to. This one that's treated to be waterproof, I don't have to chalk this up to generate that friction. My other box call, yeah, eventually I have to reapply call chalk, and you can buy that separate. It's out there to make sure that those calls are getting as much friction as they need. Craig, there's a question in here about bear tags. Blake says he doesn't have enough points.
So if you want to try and get a surplus tag, you got to be that first person in line, and usually they're very limited. Best thing you can do is keep applying for a preference point so that you build those preference points, and it's anywhere from 2 to 4 points to get drawed. For some areas might be even higher, but the surplus tag thing, they go extremely fast, and that's just part of the downfall. If we wait until that very end, we may not get one.
All right, I'm just blazing through some of the rest of these questions. Fall turkey calling, completely different animal. they're called, the way you hunt fall turkeys is you wait for them to be in a big flock, and then you run out there and they scatter like pool balls, and then you try to get them to congregate again. And a really popular fall call is called a kiki or a kiki run. And I'll see if I may not be able to do it with this call. Where's my other one? Here we go. So that's the kiki. It's just like those, it's that monotone, like kind of whistle. And a kiki run is when it goes into a yelp. Excuse me, I'm going through puberty. And those are the locator calls that they use in the fall to get back together. How important are decoys? They can be great, they can be terrible. It really depends. I tend to use them earlier in the season. Later seasons, as the spring goes on, those birds know what a decoy looks like. They know that that decoy is not moving, and if it's not moving to interact with them, they'll literally just turn tail and walk the other way. So it can really depend on what the birds are, how much pressure there's been, and how often they've seen decoys. But I have them, and I have too many of them, and I do use them, especially early in the season. Yep, it's going to be recorded. Do I ever use a gobble for calling? I personally don't. I hunt a lot of public land. I don't want to sound like the thing that people are trying to shoot. That's my personal preference. I do know people that gobble. It's a personal preference. Me, I tend to stick to the hen calls because that's what the other toms want to hear. Gobbling in the woods can be a good way to really tick off a dominant boss tom, but it can also be a good way to scare away subdominant birds. So it's not math that works out for me, but I know guys that do it. I know guys and girls that do it, and they can be successful with it. So we're coming up. We're running a little over. This information, we're going to record this and have it posted. A couple of last few tips. One, the spring woods, take ticks seriously. They carry a variety of diseases, and you need to protect yourself. If you're just out there sitting waiting for birds to come by, ticks are going to find you. So make sure you protect yourself from ticks. And the second the second thing that I will say is that just the woods. The woods are big enough for everybody to be out there. Be courteous, be respectful, police your trash, make sure you pick up after yourselves, and just enjoy it. It's a great time. I rarely get closer to wildlife than I do when I'm turkey hunting. I literally have chickadees perching on caps and hummingbirds foraging within arm's reach. It's a really awesome time to be out in the woods and see stuff that you wouldn't normally see. So I think those are our questions, and yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to post the website, the recording on our new series website that we're building at the moment. We're kind of building it as we go, but hopefully we'll have that up within the next week, and we'll make an announcement when that goes out. So just keep your eyes tuned. Be safe out in the woods, and have fun. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Talking about shotgun selection tips and our good Becoming an Outdoors Woman coordinator, and Linda Bylander and one of her tremendous volunteers is going to be leading that talk. And then yeah, we'll see y'all around, and thanks so much. Thanks everybody. Craig,
Take care.
Tell everybody goodbye,
good,
Craig.
Goodbye.
Thanks everybody.